The following podcast is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Listen, the thing is, Elton, when he gets going, a lot of the time, an absurd amount of time if I'm being honest, he curses just like a drunken sailor, you know, a drunken dick of a sailor who has just been kicked in the dick by a hugely muscled asshole. Wait, should I say it that way? Should I say balls instead? Balls, big ol' hairy balls, got it. Balls, he curses like a drunken sailor who has just been kicked in the dick by an asshole's balls. Oop, nope, that's not what I wanted to say. Damn it! No, you know what, to hell with it. I'm sticking with what I got. Yep, dick balls, that's it. Enjoy the show.
The year is 1823. The classic holiday poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, commonly known by its opening line, "'Twas the night before Christmas," was first published anonymously in the Troy Sentinel newspaper on December 23rd of that year. Jumping back to August 23rd now, American frontiersman Hugh Glass was tossed around and mauled by a grizzly bear that did everything but have sex with him in the Missouri Territory. He survived and crawled over 200 miles to safety and transformed into Leonardo DiCaprio and reenacted the entire ordeal in the movie The Revenant. Well, that's not entirely accurate. And during the same year that the real Hugh Glass, that really happened to, the guy who was almost clawed to death by a very real grizzly bear, there was a young 17-year-old boy from a formerly wealthy family, now just a run-of-the-mill, well-to-do family. That boy was living in Alexandria, Virginia, which was technically Washington, D.C. He makes a decision he would later come to regret. Later, confiding to a close friend that it was, quote, "the great mistake of my life was to take a military education," end quote, when he decided to attend the Military Academy of West Point. This is a pivotal moment that would change the course of world history, or at least American history. And it would send him on a crash course with betraying his country and skewing his future into an almost bizarro parallel with one of his heroes, George Washington. That boy was Robert E. Lee.
This is out to read side book the week. Podcast about books down to read. This is out to read side book the week. Podcast about books and out and read. Yeah, and that's all. Since I've done.
Under the watchful eyes of Bob Stratos and Apollo, welcome to Elton Reads a Book a Week, the podcast that Booking.com once called, quote, "not a destination," end quote. So, do with that what you will. My name is Elton, and I read a book a week. This time around, it's The Man Who Would Not Be Washington, a book I wish was a scathing look at the peanut butter industry's sordid beginnings that began with a rival between George Washington Carver, an American agricultural scientist, botanist, and inventor, and Robert Boondoggle Dinkins, a man who barely knew what a peanut was. One wanted to make peanut butter. The other wanted to make history. The start and end of the Peanut Butter War of 1927. Anybody remember this? Anyway, it's hardly ever spoken about in history class. There was no clear winner, save for the peanut butter lovers. Today, I wish I could talk about the execution of Peter Pan by General Reese's Cup. and the battle for Creamy Ridge, and the peanut butter slatherings of 35. What a grim time that was. So disgusted by the slatherings was the world that World War II was fought as just a palate cleanser because of that. It won't be about that today because that's just nonsensical gibberish that came out of my stupid brain. Instead, it's The Man Who Would Not Be Washington, a book about, what Amazon, Jesus Christ, Elton. A book Amazon describes as the riveting true story of Robert E. Lee, the brilliant soldier bound by marriage to George Washington's family, but turned by war against Washington's crowning achievement, the Union. On the eve of the Civil War, one soldier embodied the legacy of George Washington and the hopes of leaders across a divided land. Both North and South knew Robert E. Lee as the son of Washington's most famous eulogist and the son-in-law of Washington's adopted child. Each side sought his service for high command. Lee could choose only one. In The Man Who Would Not Be Washington, former White House speechwriter Jonathan Horn reveals how the officer, Robert E. Lee, most associated with Washington, went to war against the Union that Washington had helped forge. The story that emerges is more complicated, more tragic, and more illuminating than the familiar tale. As Washington was the man who would not be king, Lee was the man who would not be Washington. The choice was Lee's. The story is America's. But is it? I mean, isn't it more about the divisive history of racism wrought by slavery and the, gross mistreatment, both then and now, of African Americans and other minority folks? Whoa, hold your horses, Elton. We're getting too deep too soon. It's all about the motion of the ocean, not the size of the ride or size of the rise of the tides, or it doesn't really matter. It's technique that really matters, isn't it? I mean, no. Look, everybody is born different, Elton. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Not everyone can have a massive, that got away from me. More on that racist stuff later. Until then, hot damn, let's find out a little about the writer of our little story that is America First. Poor segue challenge complete. Former White House speechwriter Jonathan Horn, now residing in Bethesda, Maryland, with his wife Caroline, their children, and their dog, Ripple Dick Darth Vandernuts, has established himself as a significant voice in modern historical biography, mostly because everyone else found it really fucking boring. It's easy to become significant in a particular field of writing when there's no competition, though his critically acclaimed articles, his critically acclaimed articles, Horn has consistently explored the themes of authority, institutional transition, and the weight of legacy, and the personal cost of public nudity. And seriously, Jonathan, just writing free the nipple across your chest doesn't make running around a parking lot of a Tractor Supply store at night political speech. Okay, therefore, it's not covered by the First Amendment. Okay, it was 5:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, by the way. There was no parade in sight, like you said, friend, and no one was buying that you were just running late for one. Everyone checked the schedules and websites and shit. Look, it's just sick, Jonathan, sick. Oh, and flapping your dick from side to side is not how they greet strangers in Turkey. Okay, we checked, man. We fucking looked that up. And what in the hell am I talking about right now? I need to consume less coffee or more. One of those. Also, while we're here, his dog wasn't named that. And the public nudity, that didn't happen either. What I meant to say was public duty, not public nudity. It just left my mouth as public nudity, and I just ran with it. Okay, look. I know I just went off clop footing into the weeds with dick flapping. My bad. I'm spinning the wheel here, and I'm spinning the wheel of blame here, and it's landing on my tapering myself off of my head meds because I have no medical insurance. Slowly weaning myself off of Lexapro. But let's get back to the book because, believe it or not, Jonathan Horn actually has some fascinating research despite his bent that I haven't completely buried under my own petty grievances. The fascinating research. The intellectual trajectory of Jonathan Horn began during his undergraduate years at Yale University, from which he graduated in 2004 with a Bachelor of Arts in English. Man, I wish I had one of those. Yes, Elton. We all wish you did. I wish I had one of those. Horn has frequently noted that his studies in English literature provided the ideal framework for building the critical reading and writing skills required for his subsequent careers. A key moment in his academic development occurred when he took a highly specialized cross-listed English and political science course on the writing of Abraham Lincoln. I heard of him. It was taught by professors David Bromwich and Stephen Smith. That last one was pretty easy. Analyzing Lincoln's textural strategy and his use of biblical and constitutional rhetoric to hold a fractured nation together shaped Horn's understanding of executive leadership and drew him toward political speech writing. During his time at Yale, Horn also worked as a student reporter for the Yale Daily News. This role provided him with his first practical experience in primary source research as he assessed the historical collections housed within Yale's Sterling Library. Working with physical, historic letters and archival manuscripts fostered a deep appreciation for primary sources and original research, which became the methodological foundation of his future historical pieces. After Yale, Horn went into public service, and from 2004 to 2006, he worked at the United States Department of Education, where he crafted speeches and policy communications for Secretary Margaret Spellings during a period of significant national debate over educational accountability and federal standards. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how could anyone forget those speeches? Am I right? They were so full of gravitas and yet levity. I mean, who could fit not only a joke about the slipping educational standards of the United States school system, but have a punchline be about the diarrhea due to the misinterpretation of a menu item in Spain? I mean... Quote, and so I looked at the waiter and said, Shigela, I thought you said paella. Who am I kidding? Either way, I was going to be shitting on your floor. Am I right? Watch where you step. Ministra de Educación, Formación Profesional y Deportes. It's a tidal wave of liquid shit. Much like our testing scores in STEM subjects K through 12. His work during his time there led to his appointment to the White House Speechwriting Office, where he served from 2006 to 2009 under President George W. Bush, a president, by the way, who was ranked somewhere between the 29th and 36th overall out of all presidents. Make of that what you will. In 2008, the administration formally designated Horn as special assistant to the president for speechwriting. A person in this position researches, drafts, and edits presidents. He edits presidents. That's what he does. He peels off their noses and shit, changes them up on the fly. He completely edits them, beefs them up, injects them with muscles, and I don't fucking know what I'm saying anymore. A person in this position researches, drafts, and edits addresses for the president. Jesus. They capture the president's unique voice while synthesizing complex policy agendas into compelling narratives for a wide variety of public appearances, including keynote addresses, ceremonial remarks, and national policy announcements. So, importantly, boring as fuck. I'm kidding, I don't know. I can only say that I would be completely shit at it. This high-pressure environment offered him a rare first-hand perspective on how a president exercises power, manages domestic and international crises, and explains momentous policy decisions to the public. While in the while in the White House, which is in the United States, but while in the White House during the final years of an administration, Horn also had the unique opportunity to see a sitting president make the transition back to private life. To his surprise, he found it was fairly common for outgoing presidents to loot the silverware, take the hubcaps off official vehicles, and had permission to vandalize at least one wall in the official residence of the president. And crazy enough, on just one wall, there was an astonishing amount of poorly drawn dicks. Seeing this peaceful transfer of power firsthand sparked a deep interest in how earlier American leaders handled the loss or surrender of authority, a theme that would define his historical biographies. Cool fun fact, Horn proposed to his future wife Caroline in the Rose Garden of the White House, which has since been made into a parking lot. Huh? After the Bush administration was done, he entered the private sector. Horn did, not the parking lot. He served as the president and CEO of Jonathan Horn Communications. I mean, could have come up with a better name than my own, but whatever, says the guy currently doing Elton Reads a Book a Week podcast. And he served as the president and CEO of Jonathan Horn Communications, LLC, where he spun the wheels of steel for anyone with enough stacks of cabbage to reserve the privilege of his presence, son. Y'all don't get my motherfucking beats for free. That was his official tagline and the header on his business plan submitted to his bank to secure a loan needed for startup capital. In addition to starting his own company, he was also a senior strategist for Oval Office Writers, LLC, providing communication strategy to corporate clients. Once all his clients started recognizing a pattern within his speechwriting of relevant information being used merely as space between very long-winded, often flat, hackneyed jokes about diarrhea, he pivoted to historical biographical work. Biographical. What? Another field with hardly any competition, and filled his work there with diarrheal witticisms and very descriptive prose about breakbeats and the art of record scratching. I'm really sorry about all that side stuff. I told you I'm getting off Lexapro. I leave it to you to sort out what was my diarrheal drivel that was clearly pretty blatant nonsense. The book we'll be into this time, however, is absolutely the Man Who Would Not Be Washington, which was published in 2015, a historical biography. The book examines Lee's deep genealogical and marital ties to the nation's first president, including his marriage to the step-great-granddaughter of George Washington, and his early life in Arlington House, a Virginia estate filled with Washington family artifacts. Horn chronicles the agonizing decision Lee faced when the Lincoln administration offered him command of the Union Army, which Lee ultimately rejected out of a loyalty to his home state of Virginia. Through extensive research, the biography tracks Lee's Civil War years and the overarching conflict between his commitment to his historical hero and his secessionist choices. Read traitorous choices. Ultimately, the book presents a poignant and tragic look at a military leader whose loyalties pulled him into a war that tore his beloved country apart. A look that I think is overly generous. It's overly generous in its view of him as some tragic figure to be sympathized with. But hey, I'm a prick like that. The intersection of biography, memory, and national mythology represents one of the most complex arenas of American historical scholarship. It's akin to sifting through a room full of litter boxes to find cat turds relevant to your subject. Turds left by cats who crap knowledge or records into the room full of litter boxes. And the room, I guess, represents facts or political agenda / fantasy. I honestly lost the metaphor a while back. And the cat shit litter box room was what I latched onto while flailing into the black hole of my own stupidity. Busted, I guess. Enough of my high-minded, low-browity analysis stuff. Okay, let's delve into the wild and rollicking world of what Horn actually wrote before I accidentally smack my head off my keyboard and convince myself I'm a real historian instead of just the washed-up Tanzanian astronaut I really am. Please don't fact-check that. In The Man Who Would Not Be Washington, Robert E. Lee's Civil War and his decision that changed American history. It was published by Scribner in January 2015. Johnny Horn explores the powerful, often tragic connections binding Robert E. Lee to the legacy of the nation's premier founding patriarch, George Washington, that will be coming up more later. Who, side note, George Washington was a tryhard that sucked at his job both in the British military and the U.S. He was not a dazzling tactician in the narrow sense. The strongest historical reading is that he was a highly effective strategic commander whose main skill was not winning battles neatly, but keeping the Continental Army alive long enough to win the war. How's that sound? Your decision-making isn't the best, but at least he can barely keep people alive. So there's that. His pre-American generaling was kind of shit. In his early career, his inexperience in diplomacy and warfare is widely credited with helping him spark the French and Indian War. Hey! During the Revolution, his immense bravery occasionally crossed into recklessness, risking his life on the front lines and threatening the American cause if he were captured. Jump back a little bit, in the French and Indian War, Washington suffered serious setbacks, including the Fort Necessity defeat, and contemporaries saw real flaws in his judgment and experience. Take, for instance, the Jumonville affair. Back in May of 1754, a young George Washington led a surprise attack on a French scouting party in Pennsylvania, resulting in the death of French ensign Joseph Goulon de Jumonville. The French claimed Jumonville was an envoy delivering a message of warning, making the attack an unauthorized peacetime assassination. Do you understand what I'm saying? George Washington, he killed a messenger. He literally killed a messenger. A guy delivering a message. Colonel George Washington and his indigenous Mingo allies, led by, his name is Fucking hell. Tanacharison. Or Tanacharison. I like Sharzan. Tanacharison. Which means the half-king. They surrounded a French scouting camp in present-day Fayette County, Pennsylvania. A brief skirmish occurred, and after fighting stopped, Tanacharison tomahawked the fuck out of Jumonville. Just tomahawked him to fucking death, while Washington was attempting to interrogate him. Yeah. He's... I mean, I shouldn't laugh. But can you imagine? Washington is there and he's just... Tell me what you are here to do! Tell me what you are here to do! Tanacharison, I'm only here with the note to be delivered. I don't, French, whatever. You know. I'm only here to deliver this note. Why are you giving me such a hassle? I don't know why that went German, but I'm only here to deliver the note in my pocket. Just let me do this. Let me give the note. I'm as you Americans. I am the postman. The postal worker. Just let me give him... Would you... He just tomahawked him in the head, man. He was telling me who's he going to give the note to. Sorry, bruh. Had to tomahawk him. That's what I do. Anyway. Oops. Oh, fuck, man. I didn't even find out who was going to get the note to. Oops. It's almost like George Washington, it seems like he didn't have full control of the situation or something. France maintained that Jumonville was a diplomat carrying diplomatic instructions. I don't know. Just, I don't know, whatever diplomatic instructions are. Hey, we are the French, and we would like to talk to you about things that are interesting to the French. Please write back. XOXO heart shapes. That's nice. Anyway, France maintained that Jumonville was a diplomat carrying diplomatic instructions, while Washington argued that the French were acting like spies or something, or an advanced military party, which as it turns out, was a bit of a lie. Which, as children will tell you, Washington could not do. But he did. Quite a bit, actually. Months later, at the Battle of Fort Necessity, hopping forward here, Washington was forced to surrender. He signed, get this, articles of capitulation written in French. Inadvertently admitting to the assassination of Jumonville due to a mistranslation by his interpreter. Turned out, Washington signed the papers, which were written in French, just assuming that everything would be cool. He did have someone translate. His actual translator was a few days away or whatever. I don't know. They had translators doing loops around the countryside, and his was far away at that point, something. And he got a soldier there who half-assed maybe could read French or something. He's more like Dutch. I don't know, something like that. And essentially, Washington signed a document he hadn't read, and he couldn't read. Just was like, whatever, and signed it. And that's the kind of, that is the kind of thing you do when you're not good at your job. Washington made several tactical blunders later in his career too, like getting trapped in Harlem Heights and poorly dividing his forces at Long Island and Manhattan. If his plans went wrong, he struggled to adapt. He actually lost the majority of the major battles that he commanded and often relied on overly complex plans that failed in execution. That early stuff notwithstanding, I'll just skip to his presidency, which isn't as great as we've whitewashed it to be. Despite recognizing the moral injustice of slavery, Washington did not use his immense political capital to initiate a national phase-out or anything. He actively participated in the institution of slavery by holding over 100 enslaved people at his Mount Vernon estate. And he signed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 into law, which legally mandated the return of escaped enslaved individuals across state lines. Also, here's a fun fact. While Washington was doing his presidential shit and living in Philadelphia doing his presidential shit, Washington utilized a legal loophole, rotating the enslaved people that were working for him in and out of the state every 6 months to prevent them, get this, from qualifying for emancipation under Pennsylvania law. So he wouldn't have to free his slaves. What a great guy, right? He's on the dollar. Oh, and despite expressing moral discomfort with the institution in his later years, because, when you're getting older, I guess you start finding Jesus or something, he did not take definitive legal action, despite talking about the moral discomfort of the institution of slavery. He never took any legal action to free the enslaved people he legally owned until his death. Yep. And he was protected by his privileged status as a Virginia planter, even though he wasn't doing the planting. There's a fucking Hamilton reference. Gosh, golly heck! I feel so gosh darn bad about keeping all these people enslaved and having to whip them to do all my work for free and force them to give up their limited existence on earth just to take care of little old me again by force. But of course, to be clear, I do not feel bad enough to free them. Before I force them to do all my manual work for me, of course, and take care of me until I die. Fucking gross. Our awesome fucking founding father guy. Alright, I know that's heavy. And honestly, it should be heavy. Slavery is fucking disgusting. But if I stay in that headspace too long, I tell you, I'm gonna need a lot of illegal drugs to find my way out. And on top of that, I gotta find someone who will sell them to me. I'm old. I have no connects in that world of... It's just gonna take a long time. So I'm just gonna skip out of it for right now. Let's dial the intensity back, shall we, people? But only slightly. And let's look at the other side of this. While building the groundwork for the modern executive branch, Washington sometimes clashed with Congress over the limits of presidential power. During the 1794 Jay Treaty negotiations, Washington refused to hand over sensitive diplomatic documents to the House of Representatives, citing executive privilege. A move that sparked constitutional friction over the separation of powers. And while Washington sought peace and the establishment of formal treaties to define boundaries, his administration's Western expansionist policies ultimately led to the displacement of Native American tribes and violent frontier conflicts. Hello, racism. Violent frontier conflicts such as the Northwest Indian War. His government failed to prevent aggressive settler encroachment that repeatedly violated these treaties. All of that shit would lead to worse shit down the line, as you know. Hello, modern day. So just for clarity, he wasn't as great as we've built him up to be. Just for the record, this book is more about the parallels of Washington and Lee's overall trajectories rather than moral and character similarities, though. They're both pieces of shit, but in their own, unique, snowflakey, special ways. Just so that's said. Rather than producing a conventional military biography, Horn utilizes his background in analyzing executive power in symbolic language to construct an episodic narrative focused on the profound, personal, geographic, and symbolic ties that linked the Custis and Lee families directly to the legacy of Mount Vernon. Hail its power, Mount Vernon. Dun, 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 dun. Vernon. Dun, dun. I don't know. I started. He-Man. If you know, you know. Horn's that new movie. I don't know. I haven't gone and seen it, but I haven't seen it yet. I'm pretty sure it's terrible. I mean, it's fucking He-Man. Remember the Dolph Lundgren thing? If you don't, look it up somewhere. I don't know. There's probably YouTube shit on it. Terrible movie. Horn's exploration of Lee's life highlights an enduring public fascination with how the officer most associated with Washington's legacy went to war against the Union that Washington helped to make and forge and stuff. Or what we in the unvarnished American history game call being a traitor to his country in favor of being a racist slave owner.
Elton, I need to jump in here and tell you it's ad break time, and I'm here to tell you, dear listener, that you don't have to put up with this tyranny of advertisement, this submission to the gods of capitalism and commerce, this suppository of selling? What in the mother... Elton! We seriously need to talk about your ad copy, you unhinged weirdo. Suppository of... Look, listener, for just $4 a month, you can get the episodes ad-free, plus exclusive artwork, extra podcasts, access to special areas on the podcast Discord server, and a lot more. So consider contributing on Patreon. The link is in the description, or you can search for Elton Reads a Book a Week on Patreon, and you won't have to subject yourself to these ads anymore. Or Elton's bizarre-assed ad copy. Suppository of selling. Really, Elton? This is the last time I read this thing blind. That was disgusting. Oh! So now you're snickering over there? I see. You just wait. You're going to get yours. Here are the ads, folks.
Horn does not merely chronicle these tactical maneuvers, though, during the American Civil War. No. Rather, it investigates how the unresolved political legacies of the founding era, slavery. I had to say it louder for the people in the back. Of probably your car, your living room. I don't know. But yes, most notably the institution of chattel slavery that ultimately fractured the fucking Union that Washington helped to fucking... Horn's framework deepens when viewed alongside his subsequent scholarship, Washington's End, which details the chaotic and highly partisan final years of Washington's post-presidency. Those zany years. In Washington's End, Horn dismantles the popular misconception of an easy transition of power, revealing a tired president who feuded with successors, favored Federalist partisan policies, and supported the Alien and Sedition Acts, which, by the way, some Americans then and now saw as a violation of the First Amendment by criminalizing criticism of the government and restricting free speech. Restricting free press. Nailed it. Americans viewed the law as tyrannical overreach, fearing they threatened civil liberties and were politically designed to suppress the opposition. Democrat, Republican Party. Opposition to both of them. Washington reluctantly returned to Army command during the 1798 war crisis with France, though, despite President John Adams appointing him as Lieutenant General and Commander-in-Chief on July 4th to prepare the nation for the quasi-war with France, diplomacy ultimately prevailed. So this army he rejoined mostly existed on paper. Washington spent his final months focusing on recruiting plans and designing officer insignia stuff until his death at his Mount Vernon estate in December 1799. It's nice. He just hung around looking at artwork, military insignias, but he was like, did these colors go? You think this matches? I don't know. It makes the uniform. I don't know. It seems too flighty. Too, I don't know. Maybe a little, dry. Largely, the thematic preoccupation with the burdens of leadership and the transition of power and the weight of historical memory forms the backbone of Horne's interpretation of Robert E. Lee. Through a reconstruction of personal letters, family archives, and 19th century public discourse, Horne demonstrates how Lee, once positioned by both Northern and Southern leaders as the natural heir to Washington's figurative sword, ultimately made a fateful choice that dismantled his ancestral inheritance and permanently altered the course of the American Republic. Meaning, he lost his traitor bid against the United States, but it didn't resolve the racist divide in the country. Of course not. No, that would have taken some effort. Lord knows, effort's hard. Especially when it comes to setting things right against the people you've enslaved. To comprehend the psychological and cultural pressures acting upon Robert E. Lee on the eve of secession, one must examine the dense web of spatial and genealogical associations that defined his early life, and probably the fear he had over losing his enslaved plantation workforce to the silly notion that human beings should be free and not be enslaved. Lee was born at Stratford Hall in Westmoreland County, Virginia, a region steeped in founding-era history and located in close proximity to George Washington's own birthplace. Yippee! Following the financial ruin and subsequent departure of his father, the Revolutionary War hero Henry, Light Horse Harry, what terrible nicknames they had back then, Lee. The young Robert spent his formative years in Alexandria, the Virginia municipality most intimately associated with Washington's daily life and his Mount Vernon estate. Light Horse Harry Lee had delivered the iconic funeral oration that defined Washington as first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. I don't know why I'm doing the accent, but I'm going to continue with it for a little while. Yet, the elder Lee's life descended into tragedy. He was severely injured by a political mob in 1812. Something that, given today's political climate, should maybe be taken into consideration on doing a little more seriously these days. He also suffered in debtor's prison, an idea that shouldn't be revisited and revitalized these days, and eventually he abandoned his family, something that's a frequent occurrence in this day and age, and it is terrible. He eventually fled to the Georgia coast, where he died. Fuck that guy. Despite this abandonment, the memory of his father's revolutionary service and devotion to Washington remained a central pillar of Robert E. Lee's identity, creating an acute awareness of the standard to which he would be held. This heritage was reinforced by a remarkable genealogical convergence through marriage by wedding Mary Ann Randolph Custis, the daughter of George Washington's adopted son, George Washington Parke Custis. Lee sent it directly into the familial custodianship of the first president's material and symbolic inheritance. Their home, Arlington House, situated prominently on a hill overlooking the federal capital, served as a primary repository of Washington relics and second-generation memory. So Washington's crap, not shit, mind you, but crap. I mean, we all have crap, right? That crap that's nailed to your walls right now, that's crap. That's your crap. The stuff you buy and keep around because you need it, or wanted it, or just hanging on to it in case you ever need it or want it. It's all crap. They had George Washington's crap. I went at that a little hard. I really don't know why. I have nothing against crap. I have nothing against your crap. I have crap. We all have crap. I have plenty. And, and some would say I'm full of a fair bit of it, too. Also shit. This physical and genealogical environment exerted a continuous influence on Lee's self-perception. I don't know why I keep slipping in and out of this. Bear with me. I have to work it out. It keeps bubbling up and asserting itself. So, imagine being so devoid of self that you feel the only way to be relevant is to live in the shadow of your father-in-law's adoptive dad. Jesus Christ. The Washington and Lee families had a complicated relationship of marriage. Let me get stupid with it. Let's get stupid with it. Let's start that over. The Washington and Lee families had a complicated relationship of marriage, geography, business, and heritage. For example, during the Mexican-American War, Lee's father-in-law publicly announced that he was going to be raping a horse on his front lawn, and he invited everyone to come and see. Some were disgusted, some were enamored, and some had to draw very fast because there were no cameras back then, and they wanted to record the moment. That's gross, and of course did not happen. No. No, for example, during the Mexican-American War, Lee's father-in-law publicly announced that he was presenting one of Washington's ceremonial swords to the heroic captain, further tightening the symbolic knot. This symbolic connection was dramatically illustrated. See, they drew back then with no cameras. Dramatically illustrated during the 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry. Okay, maybe not that illustrated, but, They didn't have cameras back then, that's true. When the radical abolitionist John Brown attempted to spark a slave rebellion, he took Lewis Washington, the great-grandnephew of George Washington. He took him hostage, seizing a historic sword that Frederick the Great had allegedly presented to the first president, Jorge Washington. It was Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee, commanding a detachment of United States Marines, who successfully went in and put down the raid, rescuing Lewis Washington, and recovered the historic sword. This event highlighted Lee's position at the center of the nation's symbolic landscape. He was seen as the literal defender of the Washington lineage. This perception was so pervasive that when the Civil War broke out, leaders on both sides of the Potomac sought Lee for his service. Lee became the symbolic representative of the Washington family, despite the existence of closer living blood relatives. They were like, Lee was a general and Washington was a general. It would be such a political and, legacy win if we got the general the famous general who is loosely related to Washington to be on our side. It's so fucking dumb. Anyway, this was all despite the existence of closer living blood relatives, such as John Augustine Washington III, and I still don't know why I'm doing this accent, who would actually go on to serve as a personal, it's all over the place too, to serve as a personal staff aide to Lee during the Civil War. The central tension of Horne's book lies in the agonizing decision Lee faced in April 1861 as the sectional crisis escalated into armed conflict following the election of Abraham Lincoln. Lee was forced to choose between his devotion to the Union and his loyalty to his sweet Virginia state, sweet Virginia. What is a wealthy white plantation owner to do? Take up farming and managing his own land without chattel slavery? Fuck that. General Winfield Scott, the General-in-Chief of the United States Army and Lee's longtime mentor, regarded Lee as the finest soldier in the service, having observed his military engineering work and tactical skill during the Mexican-American War. Seeking to capitalize on both Lee's military genius and his symbolic association with the founding era, the Lincoln administration sent presidential advisor Francis P. Blair to offer Lee active command of the principal Union Army being assembled to defend the capital. Blair's appeal was explicitly framed around the legacy of the nation's founder, arguing that the American public looked to Lee as the living representative of the Washington family. Imagine being sought after by the home team, but also by the traitorous slavery-loving shit team on the other side of the river. I assume there was a river. That traitorous, slavery-loving shit team, hell-bent on betraying their own nation in order to continue torturing a captive population to exploit their labor and extrapolate ill-gotten wealth from it. What is a guy to do? Just like I said, there's so many choices. Slavery and having them do all the work for me while I whip them and don't pay them, or me doing my own work. What's the boy to do? This proposition placed Lee in a profound moral and professional dilemma. As a graduate of West Point who had served the nation for 32 years, Lee had taken a solemn oath of allegiance to the United States. His private correspondence reveals that he held deep constitutional objections to the doctrine of secession, characterizing it in letters to his family as nothing but revolution and an unconstitutional betrayal of the founders' efforts. Hey, look at that! He was correct. Furthermore, Lee's unique perspective as a military engineer influenced his analysis of the opening moves of the crisis. Following the bombardment of Fort Sumter, Lee expressed concern in his private correspondence that Lincoln had not yet withdrawn federal troops from the fort. He understood as an engineer that Fort Sumter was structurally untenable for the United States Army in the face of surrounding hostile batteries. Lee argued that if the fort were abandoned based on military necessity rather than political grounds, it might preserve the peace and prevent the outbreak of a wider civil war. He hoped to avoid firing the first shot, wishing to let Confederate President Jefferson Davis make the strategic error. Despite these strategic calculations and his opposition to secession, Lee's primary loyalty remained anchored to his native state. He maintained that he could not lift his hand against his native Virginia, arguing that his sword must only be drawn in the defense of his home state. Upon Virginia's formal vote of secession, Lee resigned his commission in the Federal Army. As much as I would love to entertain the idea that this home is where the heart is and ride or die, state of Virginia edition shit, this whole love of state loyalty and I love my state idea, the whole idea of that seems very flimsy to me. Virginia as a state would have still existed if Robert E. Lee would have joined the Union. In essence, he would have been fighting. If he would have been in the Union, he would have been fighting on its behalf in the Union. He would still be fighting for Virginia, but just to keep it in the Union. The gamble over which side would win and the fallout of that would have been the same no matter what side he chose. So even the notion of him thinking that the Confederacy had a better chance of winning is fucking nonsense. He wasn't an idiot. He was an adept at strategy and had the mind of an engineer. He had to know, as most historians today agree, the Confederacy was never truly in contention for a total military victory, as they were vastly outmatched in population, manufacturing, and railroads, and much more. So I think he probably knew he was choosing the losing side, and he would have been branded a traitor to the U.S. when they lost. But he wanted to use his skills to give that losing side at least some fighting chance. But why? Why choose it then, right? If you know they're probably gonna lose anyway. I mean, why even do that? My thought is, he couldn't imagine being poor, and he knew no other way to not be poor than to have slaves do all of his plantation work for him. And when it came down to it, Robert E. Lee was born into manor life, as a baby and raised in one of the nation's most prominent slave-owning families. He gambled on the side that would let him stay wealthy, slave-owning, and lazy if they won. And that's it. Why battle for the side that would set your enslaved workforce free if you won, or if that side won, only to leave you to work that land? What, yourself? Glory be no. He's just a rich little boy. He knew that if the Union won, he would go broke. Because, and okay, imagine this. You're Robert E. Lee, and the slaves you whipped, their whole lives and probably yours, you whipped into doing work for your sole benefit. They're now free. What's the fucking sales pitch you're gonna use to convince them to stay around and help you work the land you had just recently been forcing them to work for their whole lives in pain and misery? Hey, you guys, hey, I know. I did some really, truly horrendous, awful things to you and your families. I know. Separating your children from you and selling them and renting them out to other people to whip. I get trading them off. Whipping you for not doing my work well enough. But look, hey. What do you say you stick around after you're freed, and then you do the same work? But now hear me out. Now I'll pay you. Yeah, I mean, not a lot, but it's listen, it's because I don't want to do it. The work. Also, I want to be wealthy. Guys, hey, where you going? Guys, come on back. What are we doing here? Come back. Did I mention my beating on you would only be based on my animosity stemming from not owning you as property anymore? Listen, it wouldn't be based on me owning you as property. Guys, come back. Did you hear me? I said I wouldn't beat you because I own you. I'd only beat you because I was angry you're free and I can't own you. Are you even listening? If you leave, who is going to do the work I need to gain and maintain my wealth? Guys! Lee's loyalty to Virginia mythos bullshit seems to me on par with the Civil War, the South left the Union for states' rights garbage. It's an attempt to throw a veil on obvious racist, slavery-loving white supremacy assholes and their true motivations. So there's the gallant Christian knight bullshit myth we were all fed in history class, and then there's the actual messy, hypocritical reality of what was going down. Let's stop building the marble monument for a fucking second and look at the dumbass, infested foundation of it. Lee's decision to join the Confederacy was met with profound distress by Winfield Scott, who warned Lee that he was making the greatest mistake of his life. And Lee said, "I already made that mistake earlier in life." We'll get to that later in this episode. When Lee accepted command of Virginia's military forces in Richmond, the president of the state convention, John Janney, Janney, John Janney welcomed him by explicitly invoking the language of Light Horse Harry, Lee's eulogy. Sorry, I read that weird. Invoking the language of Light Horse Harry Lee's eulogy for Washington, effectively casting Lee as Washington's Marshal successor. Janney introduced Lee when the father of his country made his last will and testament. He gave his swords to his nephews with an injunction that they should never be drawn from their scabbards except in self-defense or in defense of the rights and liberties of their country, and that, if drawn for the latter purpose, they should fall with them in their hands rather than relinquish them. Yesterday your mother, Virginia, placed her sword in your hand upon the implied condition that we know you will keep to the letter, and in spirit that you will draw it only in her defense, and that you will fall with it in your hand rather than that the object for which it was placed there shall fail. Lee responded, profoundly impressed with the solemnity of the occasion, for which I must say I was not prepared. I accept the position assigned me by your partiality. I would have much preferred had your choice fallen on an abler man. Trusting in Almighty God and approving consciousness and the aid of my fellow citizens, I devote myself to the service of my native state, in whose behalf alone will I ever again draw my sword. Well, that is unless they too plan on taking my slaves away and have me work my land and farm on my own to make my own way. I say to hell with all that. Bobby Lee doesn't drop one bead of sweat for his own pay. No, sir. I'll cut down all of Virginia, man, woman, and child, if they think I'm going to work for a living. I'll walk a road soggy with their blood until every last bastard wanting me to labor for my own furtherment is put down like a dog. You can take that testimony straight to the ears of Jesus, by gum. Or I made up that last bit. That to me was probably more true than any of the other stuff that was said before it. But yeah, that last little bit, that was just me. This symbolic transfer was cemented when Lee was presented with a sword that had historically belonged to the Washington family estate, a highly charged gesture that masked the reality of his rebellion against the government Washington had labored to construct. The significant contribution of Horne's volume is its exploration of how the institution of slavery served as a direct, tangible link connecting Washington and the Custis family and Lee, while modern popular memory often separates the founders from the violent realities of the Civil War. Horne demonstrates that the struggle over human bondage was actively negotiated within the domestic sphere of Arlington House. Oh, how sweet. Through his marriage to Mary Custis, Lee became the executor of his father-in-law's highly complicated estate. That's true. Arlington House. George Washington Parke Custis's will mandated that the manumission of the estate's enslaved laborers, many of whom were direct descendants of the enslaved community at Mount Vernon from the Washington days. George Washington Parke Custis's will said that they would be set free within 5 years after he died. This responsibility went down to Lee as the head of the household. This responsibility, of course, forced Lee to abandon active military field service temporarily to manage the debt-ridden Arlington plantations, putting him in direct daily contact with the administrative and coercive mechanisms of slavery, meaning beating. This domestic entanglement highlights the deep contradictions within Lee's personal and public life. Although he expressed philosophical misgivings about the institution of slavery in his private correspondence, he rigorously defended its legal protections and enforced discipline on the Custis' estates, managing slaves descended from Washington's Mount Vernon plantation. During the Confederate invasion of Pennsylvania in 1863, Lee's army engaged in the systematic capture of free northern black individuals, sending them south into chattel slavery. How fucked up is that? This stark juxtaposition highlights the fundamental divide between Lee and his paternal idol. While George Washington's final testament ultimately sought to liberate those he held in bondage, the war fought by Lee's Army of Northern Virginia actively sought the permanent preservation and expansion of a slave-holding confederacy. Arlington and the Custis estates, as the Civil War progressed, the physical spaces and the material inheritances that connected Lee to Washington were systematically dismantled by the conflict. The primary stage of this material tragedy was Arlington House, which was occupied by which was occupied by federal forces early in the war due to its strategic position overlooking Washington, D.C. Under the direction of federal authorities, the estate was transformed. I love this so much. Robert E. Lee's house and lands were transformed into a military headquarters and eventually a national cemetery to inter Union dead. A move designed to ensure that the Lee family could never reoccupy the home. Yes! This process of confiscation and conversion was mirrored by the destruction of other Custis Lee properties. In 1862, the White House Plantation, another major Custis estate situated on the Pamunkey River, where George Washington had courted. I said it right. Elton. It's courted. All right, courted. Where he had courted Martha Custis. That was burned to the ground during General George B. McClellan's Peninsula, Jesus. It was burned to the ground during George B. McClellan's Peninsula Campaign. Fuck. The loss of these properties represented the physical destruction of the material legacy connecting Lee to the nation's founder, George G. Washington. The war also forced the resolution of the Custis' slaves' legal status. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation officially went into effect, coinciding with the expiration of the 5-year window mandated by George Washington Parke Custis' will. This convergence of military necessity and and familial obligation highlighted the collapse of the slaveholding system that had sustained the Custis and Lee estates. By the end of the war, Lee was an impoverished, homeless officer who had witnessed the complete destruction of his family's material wealth and symbolic connection to the founding era. Following his surrender at Appomattox in April 1865, Lee faced financial ruin and again homelessness and the imminent threat of prosecution for treason because Well, yeah. He, what's the word? Oh, he was there's a couple. He was a traitorous piece of shit that fucking deserved it. I think that's how it's pronounced. On May 29th, 1865, President Andrew Johnson issued an amnesty proclamation outlining the terms under which former Confederates could rejoin the Union, which he shouldn't, but he was a racist piece of shit too. Anyway, Lee quickly applied for the pardon on June 13th, 1865, but did not submit his required amnesty oath until his formal inauguration as president of Washington College 4 months later. So because Lee was lazy and didn't file in time, the equally racist U.S. president piece of shit, Andrew Johnson, couldn't pardon him, per the amnesty proclamation. This administrative delay resulted in the misfiling of his paperwork, a historical oversight that was not corrected until 1975. When President Gerald Ford posthumously restored Lee's citizenship. Which, I mean, fuck Bobby Lee. If he couldn't be bothered to file his shit on time and do it right, why even restore his fucking citizenship after his long fucking time ago death? Fuck him. Who cares at that point? This posthumous pardon inadvertently fed into the lost cause myth, with apologists citing the misfiling that Bobby Lee did. He fucked that up. They saw it as a sign of Northern vindictiveness rather than Lee's own delayed fucking idiocy compliance. This dynamic occurred despite Charles Sumner's famous post-war declaration, "I hand him over to the avenging pen of history." At Washington College, Lee sought to redirect his educational philosophy toward the future, encouraging young Southern men to abandon their wartime animosities, embrace the termination of slavery, and work toward the physical and economic reconstruction of the unified nation. This final chapter of Lee's life was widely seen as an attempt to align his legacy with Washington's vision of national unity. Following his death, though, in 1870, the institution was renamed Washington and Lee University, physically merging their names in the stone of American educational infrastructure. How sweet. Interestingly, Lee's post-war correspondence reveals a deep aversion to the construction of physical Confederate monuments, a stance that has gained renewed relevance in modern civic discourse. And a stance I absolutely agree with. There should be no Confederate monuments. When asked to support various memorial associations, Lee consistently declined, arguing that physical markers of the Civil War would only serve to keep open wounds of sectional strife. In an 1866 letter, he urged the resources be directed towards supporting widows and marking graves rather than erecting national granite tributes. In that same year, he rejected a proposal to build a monument to Stonewall Jackson, arguing that it was unfair to ask families of Confederate veterans for money when they could barely feed themselves. He even declined to participate in marking battlefield positions at Gettysburg, arguing that it was wiser to wait for better times, when such markers would not provoke political division. At his own funeral in 1870, Lee was not buried in his military uniform, and no Confederate flags or military regalia were displayed during the procession, reflecting his desire to transition quietly into the national past. Now, to really give the man who would not be Washington a fair shake, I think it must be situated within the broader landscape of Civil War historiography. Historiography, I frankly don't delve into that much. I grew up in Oklahoma near the Texas border. I heard far more about the Civil War than I cared to while growing up. It was revisited in every history class, in every new grade, all the way up through, 11th grade. All through school, I would hear the push of the Southern apologists and proponents of the lost cause myth who sought to depict Robert E. Lee as a blameless, tragic figure, a gallant Christian knight, who reluctantly took up the arms solely to defend his homeland of Virginia. That early myth-making exemplified by the monumental biographies of Douglas Southall Freeman and systematically minimized Lee's active defense of slavery and his legal commission of treason against the United States. It was a fucked up line of bullshit to be taught in schools. And I bought into it as a kid. Then, I kept reading and learned more about it and this fucking lost cause bullshit as time went on. It's astounding the amount of damage shit like this does to generations of children. And it just, grows up with them. They think they know the truth. Or they know that it was states' rights what the fucking Civil War was fought over. It was slavery. I happen to be an avid reader of both nonfiction and fiction stuff, so I learned how wrong that lost cause horse shit really was. But given that people who read daily for pleasure in the United States has dropped by more than 40% over the last 20 years, and it's declining by about 3% annually, you know that's going to be perpetuated way longer than ever should be. That decline, by the way, probably driven by the explosion of digital media, shrinking leisure time, and changing attention spans. This shift is widening disparities in literacy across different demographics, by the way. Not to mention that between 33% to 42% of graduates in the United States never read another fucking book after completing their education, after graduating out of high school or even college. About 33% of high school graduates and roughly 42% of college graduates report that the last full book they completed was for a fucking school assignment. It's no wonder that this toxic-ass racist drivel is fucking passed on and accepted as concrete, settled historic fact. Oh, and another quick fun fact to brighten your outlook on for humanity. Just, up to 70% of adults have not set foot in a bookstore in the past 5 years. Hey! Damn it! That really brightens up your day, huh? Doesn't it? Jesus Christ. Oh, side note, if you want to buy the book, The Man Who Would Not Be Washington, you can do it via the links in the episode description. Hey! So you still don't have to set foot in a bookstore. That's kind of sad. But still, I get a little commission, and you get a lot of knowledge. Then, when you finish reading it, you can come litter my various comment sections about how misguided and idiotic I really am, and and just pepper me with it was states' rights, or I'm kidding, it was not states' rights, whatever. But nothing but winning all over the place for all that. Just buy the book from the link. Sorry, I'm just broke, unemployed. And podcasting, groping for change. You get it. Hard times. Moving on. Back to people attempting to skew America's historical memory towards the racist dark side with that lost cause trash. On the other side of the fence, conversely, late 20th century revisionist scholars such as Thomas Conley and Michael Fellman and Alan Nolan, they sought to dismantle this marble monument, presenting a much harsher, more critical portrait of Lee's personal character and military strategy. This academic debate is contextualized in modern scholarship, such as Justin Henry Honeycutt's 2022 thesis, Robert E. Lee, The Gray Knight, History and Memory in Constructing the Lost Cause Myth, which explores how the collective memory of Lee in both northern and southern states encouraged the failure of post-Civil War Reconstruction. In Jonathan Horn's defense, though, his narrative path navigates carefully between these two historiographical extremes. See what I pushed through that word. Rather than portraying Lee as a flawless icon or an unmitigated villain. Horn presents, a deeply human portrait characterized by fatalism, inner turmoil, and a profound sense of self-denial. This psychological dimension is a recurring theme throughout the book. Horn argues that Lee's life was defined by an ongoing surrender of his own desires to the demands of others, whether to his volatile father, his demanding father-in-law, his chronically ill wife, or his beloved native state. This pervasive fatalism allowed Lee to view himself as a mere passenger to destiny, shielding him from the full moral weight of his decision to abandon his federal oath. Much like Robert B. McCaslin's Lee in the Shadow of Washington, published in 2001, Horn finds that Lee was often guided in his actions and decision-making by an acute awareness of the standard he would be held to because of his connections to Washington, and decides to just shit all over them. However, whereas McCaslin structures his book around Lee's conscious self-modeling, Horn designed his book as a series of episodic scenes, which I liked. The eminent historian Alan C. Guelzo, Jesus Christ, Guelzo, Alan C. Guelzo, noted that while Horn's book, the title implies a comprehensive parallel study, the actual text functions more as a series of beautifully rendered historical vignettes. Guelzo observes that the monumental decision of 1861 occupies only a single chapter, that Lee himself was often highly cautious about publicly comparing himself to the nation's founder. Nevertheless, Horn's work is widely organized. Fucking what is going on with me? Horn's work is widely recognized for its rich archival research, particularly its reliance on the Lee family papers housed at the Library of Congress. John Carver Edwards' writing for Library Journal awarded the book a starred review, calling it a seminal contribution of significant historiographical value. That word. Similarly, Richard Brookhiser, writing for National Review, praised the work as thought-provoking and deeply sad. Who'd have thought the right-wing National Review would? Who? Of course, they'd find it sad, highlighting its success in conveying the tragic scale of Lee's decision. It should be noted that the National Review has an established editorial bias that leans right to far right. I mean, it was founded in 1955 by William F. Buckley Jr., for fuck's sake. If you know, you know. It serves as a leading voice in American conservatism. So take their praise with a grain of, I want to say, salt. Perhaps the most potent physical symbol of the complex historical legacy is the Arlington Memorial Bridge, which spans the Potomac River to connect the Lincoln Memorial on the Washington, D.C. side directly with the neoclassical facade of Arlington House on the Virginia side. First proposed in 1886 as a potential monument to Ulysses S. Grant, the bridge project was stalled for decades due to intense political debates over sectional representation and naming rights. Fucking Southern congressmen resisted a structure dedicated solely to Union triumphs, while Northern representatives opposed early efforts to incorporate Robert E. Lee's name alongside Grant's because, well, one was a fucking traitor and the other wasn't. It was not until the approach of the bicentennial of George Washington's birthday in 1932, combined with severe traffic congestion associated with the dedication of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in November 1921, that political consensus was reached, allowing for the completion of the neoclassical masonry and steel structure. Horn observes in the book that the bridge was explicitly designed as an architectural symbol of national reconciliation, literally binding the North and South together across the historic divide of the Potomac River. Yet, this physical manifestation of unity remains structurally vulnerable. By the 21st century, the bridge had fallen into a state of severe disrepair. With its concrete arches and interior steel bascule posts suffering from advanced corrosion, a physical deterioration that required vehicle weight restrictions and a massive federal renovation effort. How fucking fitting, right? This structural fragility serves as a powerful metaphor for the delicate, often precarious nature of the post-war national consensus. The physical decay of the bridge mirrors the ongoing challenges to the mythological compromise that attempted to equate the legacy of the nation's founder with the general who betrayed it and led a rebellion against it. The Man Who Would Not Be Washington offers a compelling, human-scaled reassessment of Robert E. Lee's relationship with the American founding era by tracing, the extensive familial and, again, geographic and material connections that bound the Custis and Lee families to George Washington. Horn highlights the profound personal dimension of Lee's 1861 decision. Ultimately, the tragic divergence between the two figures is absolute. While Washington, slave-owning, bad at his military job first president, surrendered military power to forge a constitutional union, Lee, slave-owning traitor to his nation, resigned his federal commission to lead a military effort designed to dissolve it. By analyzing the physical spaces of memory from the pillaged hallways of Arlington House to the deteriorating spans of the Memorial Bridge, the struggle to define Washington's legacy continues to shape the physical and ideological landscape of modern America. My own personal belief, by the way, given all the research I've been doing on this stuff and reading the book on Robbie Lee lately, I think that his first mistake was choosing to go to West Point when he was a kid. That was his biggest. He famously confessed later in life that the great mistake of my life was taking a military education, and he often wished he had followed his mother's advice to never join the Army. I felt that it was that military education and enlistment that was ultimately the impetus of his journey to the center of his lazy whiteness, choosing where to take his talents, which unfortunately was only slightly north of South Beach. Instead of that life, Lee frequently expressed a desire to live a quiet, private life as a farmer, stating in an interview once that, quote, "The life of a farmer, I think, would have suited me just fine. Lazy days where the slaves did all the work for you, As a farmer, you just collect a paycheck and, all those extra other perks, In the interview, it said that he looked off into the distance for a moment before finishing, You don't get to rape nearly as many sheep as an army general." Okay, other than the regret, and him wanting to be a farmer, yeah, I made up the rest. I made it up. Or did I? You can't prove that wasn't the reason he wanted to be a farmer. Nuh-uh. No, you can't. And now, when life gives you lemon.
I feel I have to apologize to the universe or whatever I've offended. I don't think I'm cut out for all this existing. Frankly, I'm sorry for aging, I guess. Yeah, this is old news, both literally and metaphorically. I'm finding out quickly that, despite my normal mental shortcomings, my body is also, slowly, pulling me into a grave. Yeah, death comes for us all. Believe me, I drink and smoke, daily, or, if we're all being honest here, hourly. So I'm poking that black-robed, scythe-swinging bastard all the time. But that's something I enjoy, you know? Smoking is so great. Except for kids. Kids, it's a hard no-no. Uncle Lemon clearly says don't do it. Let me just cut to the real heart of the matter, which is motherfucking exercise. Okay, I'm cliche, fucking hack, comedy hack, cliche dickhole, or whatever. I'll take that. I've heard worse. Still, all right, here's the deal. I went to the doctor the other day for my usual dose of bad news, and this time I'm busted. Hard. Lemon, are you exercising? He's English, a burly guy. His hands are uncomfortably huge. Anyway, I say, yeah, of course, Doc. Yeah, I exercise every day. Daily. Sometimes, hourly. I'm doing it right now, only it's butt cheek day. We laugh, or at least I do. Then he looks at me, all stern-like, and says, if you don't start exercising, Lemon, your heart will explode in your chest like a bleeding pork sausage hand grenade, you dumb twat. Or something like that. To tell you the truth, his accent can be a tough read sometimes. Lemon, this is non-negotiable. You must commit to exercising. He pats me on the shoulder, reassuringly, I guess, and then goes on saying, look, maybe you can get a bit of equipment or whatever and knock it about a bit. Like, say, get some of those stretchy rubber bands, or like barbells or something. Oh, how about one of those big tractor tires you can toss about and smack on with a sledgehammer? They're really popular these days, he says while continuing my exam. I couldn't roll my eyes hard enough at that. Still, I am flabby. There's no questioning that. Every extra pound, a testament to the exquisite offerings of New York's finest pizza chefs. But the doc is right. I need to do something about this. So I whip out my phone and commit, right then and there. I'm entering my fitness era, damn it. A little late to the game, sure, but better late than never, right? Fuck it. I can do this. I've noticed lately that, with aging, my ability to multitask has taken a turn for the worse. Though, in my defense, I'm not sure there are many people who can successfully navigate a search for a fitness tractor tire with another man's finger inside them.
I'm not entirely sure why I've been called in to do this bit. Is he dead or something? No? Oh, well, righto. He's alive, and I'm assuming just lazy. It doesn't even matter, really. I'll charge him all the same. Reginald Tillis was never one to turn down easy money. I'll give it a whack. Let's see here. Well, I'm not saying that. Pfft. What's this? No, not that either. Oh. See, this here. That line there, that's a hard no, with a capital N on it. Oh, what's this? This part. I'll start here. I'll vamp a little to get the rhythm down, the feel. Tell him he's far too liberal with the word penis in his copy. It's borderline psychotic. Elton would like to invite you to listen to some of his other work. He's writing a... What's this? What's a Substack? Well, he's writing things on that, so yeah. Righto. Go and give that a proper look-see, if you would be so kind. And it says here he'd like to ask you to listen to the other podcasts he's involved in, namely 2 Books, 1 Cup. He says it's very funny and is co-hosted by the brilliant Glenn and Gertie Nuzzle of the Nuzzle House podcast endeavours. So, Be sure to do that. And Elton would like to, again, invite you to contribute to the Patreon page, wherein you get all kinds of extras. What on earth does that bloody mean? Oh, right, extra podcasts and ad-free episodes. Sure, right, sounds... subscribe to the social medias, such and so forth, so that you're up to date with all the latest goings-on with the podcast. Wouldn't want to miss out on that. And share the podcast with friends, family, etc., etc. Yep. Yeah. And yeah, that would help indeed. Also, if you want to read the book he talked about in the episode, please consider buying it via one of the links in the episode description. One is for, Amazon. The other link, this says that it supports independent booksellers with your purchase, which is even better, I'd say. Truly. So, with that, have a wonderful... Oh, wait. There's more here. Right. Elton says to read a book this week, and that's sound advice, I'd say. He says, so that they don't die out, which would be terrible all the way around, don't you think? So, thank you for listening to Elton's podcast. Huzzah!
Washington, dun 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 da 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 da. Washington, dun da 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 da. I never watched He-Man.